Hello and welcome to Safe Space, the official Safe in Our World podcast. For those who don't know, the main goal of Safe in Our World is to create and foster worldwide mental health awareness within the video games industry. My name is Rosie, and today I'm joined by Shahid, who is now in his 39th year in the games industry, I believe. 40th year! Damn it. Well, I mean, it's still amazing.
It's cheating, really. I mean, I won't hit 40 years until next May, June. That'll be my actual 40th anniversary. But because it's my 40th year, right? So like when you're born, you're 0 years old, but it's your first year of life. So
exactly. No, I totally agree.
I get 2 40ths that way.
Yes, exactly. Celebrate twice.
Absolutely.
But you know, you've done a fair amount of time in the games industry, and you know, you've had more achievements than I know or will be able to do justice for in this introduction. But a couple that I stole off your Twitter profile, I think, was or your LinkedIn, was you've been named one of the games industry's international top 10 persons of the year and top 100 influencers in the British games industry.
It's a long time ago.
It's still amazing. Don't put yourself down.
I'm not. I'm just saying, just for clarification, you know, just in case anyone thinks I'm still an influencer or relevant in any way.
You are. Oh my gosh, absolutely you are. And we're going to talk more about it. But no, not at all. But yeah, I mean, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Because I know that won't have done it justice. And you've got so much more
life
about you.
Banging on about myself. I mean, you know, if you want me to talk about myself, best place to look is on Twitter. Look at my pinned tweet, which talks about my first 3 years in the industry, 1982 to 85.
Yes. So I wanted to talk about that because it's brilliant.
I mean, you know, that's kind of gives you an indication of how open I am about what I have and haven't done. I'm also as open about my shortcomings and failings, probably more so my shortcomings and failings, which is a compensation factor for God knows what.
No, but I think that's important because I think so many people are afraid to fail, and it's a learning process, if anything. Yeah.
You only learn when you fail, as I keep telling my children. You never learn anything through success. You get to enjoy it for a few minutes, and then you're on to the next series of failures, you know? So
exactly. Embrace the failure.
Strap in for the long haul, you know? But quickly, from 82 to 97, I was in development. So I was a programmer primarily, but also a technical producer who also did really complicated programming towards the end. And then from 97 through till 2001, I was in different kinds of publishing. And then from 2003, I had a startup called Imaginatively Start, which will probably be quite relevant today. Certainly did become relevant later, but sadly was ahead of its time, which is code for failed miserably. From 2003 to 2005, I had a complete life meltdown. Probably one of the darkest periods of my life, if not the darkest. And then from 2005 to 2015, I was at PlayStation, the first half of which, as I keep saying, were miserable. The last half were ecstatic. And then I left when everything was going absolutely perfectly and my career trajectory was practically vertical. I decided to up and leave because that's when you should leave, really. And I decided to become a developer again. And that's what I've been doing kind of since, with a bunch of other things as well. The fashionable people in career management call it a portfolio career. I just say I'm wearing lots of hats.
It's amazing though. It's so much fun to know that you've done so many different things as well within the industry, and you've not just stuck to one. And you've like explored lots of different avenues.
Definitely. I mean, that I've always gone for my curiosity. I always took pay cuts to follow my curiosity, which didn't always go down with other people, as you can imagine. But you know, it was not about the money for me. I mean, sometimes money became absolutely vital. Like, you know, when you can't make rent, money becomes quite pressing. Yeah. But apart from that, I tended to make big jumps. So to learn, to explore my curiosity, rather than to follow a path. Because once you can see where you're going to end up, it kind of gets boring. I like to meander, wander, find new territory, push myself in new directions. I just find that a bit more fun. I know I'm going to get hurt doing that, but like we said earlier, you're going to get hurt when you learn. It's inevitable.
Yeah, it's more about what you do with it. And I feel like it's so important as well not to, money is obviously important, especially if it's not a privilege that you have, but you have to do something you're passionate about, otherwise you just won't find anything fulfilling in your job.
Yeah, I
Or
mean, the danger there, of course, is that the whole money insecurity thing seems to be becoming more of an issue. No one I know, well, actually very, very few. I do know some people who fit in the category, but most of the people I know, if they lost their jobs, wouldn't be able to last more than a month or two. And for me, for the vast majority of my working life, I would not have been able to make the next month's rent had I lost my job straight away. Just wouldn't have been possible. And that does put not just pressure on you, but it also reduces your options. And reducing your options means you become a little more conservative. Thing is, though, despite that, I've never been conservative. I've always taken risks and always gone for what I thought was right. And that meant I got into trouble a lot. And I had to do a lot of climbing down off of very high horses. But there you go. That's me. I don't know if it's brave or stupid or passionate, but really, really believing in your position and saying, look, I don't care what other people think. I'm just going to say what I think and then go for that. I think a lot of the time, certainly early on in my career, it was Dunning-Kruger rearing its definitely Dunning-Kruger for the first few decades. I'm gonna say it. First few decades, lots of Dunning-Kruger. Really thought I knew what I was doing, and I didn't. And certainly learned that lesson at PlayStation, where for the second half, it suddenly clicked how corporations worked. It suddenly clicked that it wasn't all a big conspiracy. It suddenly clicked that everyone in this enormous organization was a human being, and that trying to coordinate all of these different ambitions, desires, goals, dreams, lives, you're onto a hiding to nothing. It's a really, really difficult job. And I saw the effect that different leadership had on the company and its people. And I learned a lot, and by that time I thought, okay, but maybe my previous stated positions were not so cool, And I think that was a really, really important lesson. It came very late in life, but
it still came.
It did. And the other thing is, you see, it wasn't at the cost of being authentic. I'd never had to be inauthentic. So whatever I can say about my past, having said things I would probably not have said in hindsight, at least I was authentic, whereas other people were just playing safe. And that gave me opportunities that I wouldn't ordinarily have had.
Yeah,
So I had that
absolutely.
going for it.
I reread your Code is Just, which is the series that you referenced on your Twitter as well. And it's amazing how many opportunities you can get if you're just bold enough to try for it. Even if you're not totally sure of what you're doing, I can't remember which bit it was, but I think you were saying they asked you if you could code something on a different program, and you were just like, yeah, no, totally, no problem, and you didn't even know what they were talking about.
Well, I knew what they were talking about. It's just that I hadn't learned it yet, and that and the thing is, it sounds like you're really out on a limb, but actually, at that point, I was so good at learning new stuff fast, and I was so committed, and I knew what the problem was. Because I knew what the problem was, because I knew that this is what would be involved in learning it, I was confident enough to be able to say, yep, no problem, because I knew I would learn it in no time at all. It's a bit different today because you have so many variables. It's not just that there's a lot of stuff that we don't understand about new technology. It's that because our lives are so much more complicated and we have so many commitments and we have so many moving parts, it becomes harder to commit to something dangerous now. I still think it's important to do. Sometimes it's important to go out on a limb and say, yep, that is no problem at all.
It's you never learn something inside your comfort zone, do you?
Absolutely. You got 100%. If you're not prepared to do that, if you're not prepared to get uncomfortable, and you know, there's a saying, you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. No, that's nonsense.
No, if you're
You
not
will
scared, it's
never,
not worth
that's
it.
the whole point. That's the whole point of discomfort. You will never be comfortable being uncomfortable. But what will happen is that you'll become familiar with the feeling. And as you become familiar with the feeling, your brain will wire itself slightly differently. And instead of thinking, this is uncomfortable now, it's going to be uncomfortable forever, your brain will rewire itself to say, this is uncomfortable now, but the payoff will be huge. And now you're starting to look at the payoff. And that's the difference. You'll never get comfortable being uncomfortable. You'll suddenly start to see that there is an end in sight, and that end in sight is way better than where you were before.
Yes. It's more like your fear response is changing, or how you
Yeah.
react is different, 'cause
So it's motive, right? So for example, if someone tells me to run into a burning building, I'm not going to do it. But if someone tells me there's a child in there running to the burning building, I'm running in.
yeah.
Very different. Motive is everything.
Yeah, that's true. And if you really, really want something, you have to do it. It's not worth not knowing. That I think that's the thing that gets me, is that if I really want something and I'm too afraid to do it. One of my favorite quotes is, if you can't beat fear, just do it scared. And I feel like that's very applicable here, because it's just like no one is ever gonna be in a space where they're comfortable with absolutely everything. Like, it's just not how it works. And fear is not a bad thing necessarily, as long as you can learn to control it, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's the definition of courage. Courage is not
Yeah,
acting without fear. Courage is acting in the presence of fear. That's the difference between courage and stupidity, really. I mean, and I think for most of my career, I was stupid. I just didn't have any idea how painful it was going to be, and I went ahead and did it because I was excited. And I got a little bit more hesitant as the decades rolled on, but not much more. I'm still, thankfully, naive enough. I won't say stupid. I'll say hopefully, um, it's a hopeful approach to life. Things will
yeah,
turn out all right, and I kind of disregard the fear and panic and pain and difficulty that's about to come. And maybe that's not a good thing, but it's the only way things get done.
yeah, I agree. So just on your series, which I've realized as well, there's a second series out right now for Coders Just. Is that right?
There is indeed, yeah.
I am ashamed to say I haven't read it yet, because I only found it yesterday and was blown away at how quickly you've been putting it out, 'cause it's long and it's brilliant. And how you've found the time to do that is just awesome. But when I was reading it, you talk about your mental health and you talk about your experiences of bullying and racism growing up. And if anyone hasn't read it, I'll link it in the description of the podcast. But in terms of a question, I guess I wanted to ask what prompted you to write the story in the first place, about how you started within the industry, but also how you approach talking about mental health more openly.
Okay, so I didn't set about writing Code is Just. There was no plan. What happened was I realized, and I've realized this for some time, but as an industry, we're not very good at preserving our heritage. We're getting better. But worse than that, we're not very good at remembering our people. And a few people had passed away that I knew of, and COVID times made it even more painful because, there's no meeting up.
No.
Everything is remote, and you're hearing about this in your bubble, and you're hearing about death upon death of people that young people. And
Yeah.
finally, one of my best friends in the industry passed away quite suddenly, and we were speaking on the phone regularly, Mikey. Uh, and it was just so sudden and so shocking. I got the news on a Saturday evening, and I'll never forget it. I was sitting there and just couldn't stop staring at my phone. And I'd found out, and I'd been thinking for a while. I need to share what I've done with my family, because what will they be able to say? If I pass away, what will they be able to say to other people? Not the industry, but their family. This is what my dad did. They won't have a clue. Oh, he was in games. He had a high profile at PlayStation. He helped developers, and that's it. But they'll know nothing about my past. They'll know nothing about the games I made or how I got into the industry. And there's this ache in me to tell the story of the early 80s and how home computing in this country blossomed. And we've heard it from... Okay, I don't want to disparage anybody here. I want to be really careful, but we've heard a particular kind of perspective on the early 80s. Okay? And I think it's a technical perspective, and it's a kind of factual perspective. And what I felt hadn't come across was a storied perspective. And by that, I mean, what was the reality of Britain at that time?
Yep.
And in my case, of course, that reality was quite brutal because of several converging factors. I didn't set out to tell those things, but what I wanted to do was try to explain that this thing that happened in Britain in the early 80s was absolutely incredible. It was a movement, the likes of which we'd never seen. We'd only seen it in other industries. We'd seen it with, for example, with the birth of rock and roll in the US. We'd seen it with the birth of punk to a lesser extent. And before that, I guess, moving pictures, and it was bigger than all of those. And I don't think people really got that it was bigger than all of those. And all of the kids knew that. And a lot of the kids who grew up to be old farts like me, because they were invariably white males, right? They'd write about that time, and they would have a particular perspective, and that perspective would be nice, but it wouldn't be a story. I wouldn't know much about them. I'd know about the facts, but you can get the facts off Wikipedia. Anyone has access to the facts. The facts are not as important as
No.
as the context for those facts, and the context is what was really important. And so, with all of this going round my head, thinking that one day I got to tell this story, when Mikey passed away, I thought, if I don't do it now, I never will. And of course, you know what happens. You have that thought in your head. You think this is it, and then nothing. And then a week later, I found an email in my inbox. I was looking for something else, and it was a list of all the games I'd ever done, or worked on, or been involved in up till about 1990 something. It was the first 10, 12 years or so. And I thought, this is it. So I thought, okay, all I'm going to do is I'm going to start listing every single one of these projects in chronological order, and I'm going to write a tweet about them. That was my plan. So if you look at the first episode of Code is Just, it's very factual. It's like 1982, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
and then suddenly something happens. I don't know what happens, but I start to add more detail. And then by Monday, it's completely taken off. It is rocketing. It's got so much attention. And then when I finish on the Friday, there are hundreds and hundreds of people commenting and retweeting and liking live. And then it's on the weekend, it's thousands, and then it's tens of thousands. I had some crazy number. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 15 million impressions
Oh my gosh, that's
by the
amazing.
first weekend, and over 50,000 likes across the thread on the first weekend, and God knows how many retweets. And the best figure for me was the quote tweets. That meant the quote tweets were, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000. So that's how
That's
many
huge.
people had read the entire thread. I mean, it's a lot, 300 plus tweets, right? Over 7 days. I read the whole thing. They found that it moved them, and it moved them enough that they felt like they could put their own take on it. And that
Yeah.
for me meant, yeah, this has worked. This has absolutely worked. Because it was not just about computing in the early 80s and the facts and figures. It was about the racism. It was about the poverty. It was about the illness. It was about the beauty of that time that was twinned with the ugliness of that time as well. It was about Thatcherism. It was about the institutions of those days. It was about how the world was so different. We didn't have mobile phones. We didn't even have CDs. You know, we had cassette tapes. VHS was pretty new at that time. We had 3.5 channels on the telly. Channel 4, I don't think was even around, or was it? I'm not sure. It might have come later. So it was a very, very different world. You know, we didn't even have a remote control for our telly. That's how far back we're talking.
Yeah, it was a
So
totally different world, and, like, when I was
yeah,
reading it, I
yeah,
was born in, mid-late 90s, so all of this is totally new to me as well.
prehistoric.
Um, it felt like a really honest account of someone just growing up. That's what I liked about it. It was very authentic.
The thing I really want to know from you is this. Did you get the excitement that I felt of that era? Did it come across?
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. You could tell how passionate you were about it and how, like, you just really got engrossed in the story of what was going on, and you started rooting for you, and, like, when you were saying, like, "Oh, my maybe this is gonna happen, maybe not," and you could see all these opportunities and see how it was all growing and coming together,
Mm.
especially when so many people were still so skeptical about games, and it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
a real job and all of this sort of stuff.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, it sounds like obviously it's not perfect, and there are a lot of hardships that you had to go through as well, but what an exciting time to be able to get into the games world.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad that happened because that's what I wanted. Wanted to convey that's what I wanted to get across. Just the excitement of that time, how much it meant to me, what I had to it's not what I had to. It's what I felt absolutely driven to accomplish because it offered so much. It was both exciting and it was a way out.
Yeah. But you could tell, like, you gave everything, like, you put in everything to make sure that
Mm.
you got what you did.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Beyond on occasion, with the health and all of that, but
Yeah, no, I mean, when you had your deadline of 3 weeks or something to get a
mm,
bonus for I can't remember what it was for. Um,
yeah, it was Jet Set Willy.
yes, yeah,
Mm.
and just, working day and night, it's absolute carnage, I imagine, but
Oh, I didn't really care. I mean,
no,
I
well,
was
that's the
so
thing, like, when you're
yeah,
so into it,
yeah.
it's not something you consider.
I mean, I should have been
Um,
in hospital half of the time, but yeah, mind you, that's true for half of my life. So, but I didn't care. I just plowed on. It's amazing what you can make yourself do when you're motivated and committed and passionate.
yeah, but I guess it's so having someone like you in the industry who's done all of that, and now, you're on not the other side, but you've grown up with the industry, I guess. Um, do you have, like, specific things that you would try and encourage others who are looking to kind of follow their own journey within the industry and getting into the industry itself? Would you have, like, main takeaways to try and give someone to if they were looking to do that?
So my advice is really boring, but it is to master the thing and to use the knowledge that you gained of the learning process to transfer all of the transferable stuff over to another skill. And then when you have a basket of skills, at least 2, but ideally more, because the more you do, the easier it gets. Then you become unique because then you start to have an intersection. And
Mm,
that's what makes you interesting. That's what makes you valuable. I want to say valuable. I don't obviously, that's not a value judgment as a human being. I'm only talking about value to the marketplace because we're talking about young people. They want jobs, they want careers, and we are talking about a marketplace because that's the kind of world we live in. So if you want to have value to the marketplace, you need to have skills that are valuable. And the most valuable skills will be the ability to learn quickly, the ability to transfer your skills quickly, and to have a unique combination of skills that nobody else has. And the thing is, once you've mastered one thing, you start to develop a voice. That's what makes you unique. We have a lot of people out there who are me too, because all they've done is they've learned a rote style. And that's not their fault. That's just the way the system is nowadays. It's very much about targets, 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 instead of just the joy of learning and
Yeah.
developing a voice, you know? So that's it. Those are the main things. It's really boring advice, but I talk about it in my newsletter. I've talked about it in podcasts before, and whenever I teach or whenever I coach, I bring up the same things. I just string it out a bit to explain all of the constituent parts, show how it's possible to keep going. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm still doing it now. I'm 55. I'm going to be 56 in a few weeks, and I'm still learning stuff, and it's great. And it's how you stay young. That's the other thing. You keep learning, keep putting yourself through difficult learning, you stay young.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I don't think it's boring advice necessarily. Like it's just very honest about how you can do it. And like you say, like being able to learn quickly and transfer your skills is so much more important than being a master in one specific thing. Because
But you
if
need
people
to
see
master the
potential
one
in you as a
specific thing.
person, right? And they see potential in you and how you might be able to fit in and become more valuable to the industry. And if you've got the skills that you're able to do it, you just don't have the knowledge yet. That's something you can pick up, you know.
Yeah, the skills are way more important than knowledge. You're absolutely right. I mean, the thing is, it's important to stress you do have to master something, but you
Yeah.
don't have to master it to the whole 10,000 hours level.
No.
That's the myth. You don't have to be that driven that you want to be the very best in the world. Sure, if you want to challenge Carmack, for example, or writing 3D engines, then you need to put in not 10,000, maybe 20,000, maybe never. Maybe it's never going to happen because how many people can be Olympic gold medalists, right?
Mm, exactly. Interesting. I mean, I guess on the topic of being like trying to be the best or not trying to be the best necessarily, but really trying to push forward to be in the top 10%, top 5% of a field that you're interested in. I kind of wanted to put that on the flip side and talk about imposter syndrome because I know that you've talked about it before when we did a panel back in April, the end of April, I think this year, where we discussed imposter syndrome with a few other industry people as well. And I guess I just wanted to kind of talk about your experiences with imposter syndrome within the journey that you've had.
I think for me, it it happened on several occasions. Um, Early on, not so much. Early on, I didn't really have any imposter syndrome. I'd done in Kruger. I thought I was um, the bee's knees, and I clearly was not. And that's the thing, right? So I think there's a lot of casual talk about imposter syndrome. I mean, imposter syndrome is when you've got someone who's clearly extremely capable and successful in their field, who thinks that their work is not good enough, and they feel like they don't belong in belong to the status group to which they've been assigned by other people.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of people say, "I feel imposter syndrome." Well, the thing is, you're not feeling imposter syndrome for a lot of people because you haven't achieved that level yet. What you're feeling is nervous.
Mhm.
And it's important to differentiate. Imposter syndrome is debilitating, and it applies to very few people. But there are a lot of people who suffer from it. Um, and there are lots of things you can do to work around it. I don't think I deserved to be able to say I was suffering from imposter syndrome until I would say 30 odd years into my career. So when I first started talking to developers at PlayStation, I felt like an imposter? What am I doing here? You know, the people around me clearly know this stuff way better than I do. And that was just because I'd had a little time out and because I'd had quite a blow not that long ago. Really difficult life period. If you remember, I mentioned 2003, back in the 2003 to 2004, 5 was a very difficult period in my life. So I was recovering from that, and I just felt, do I really belong here? And then when things started to go really well for me at PlayStation, again, you know, a lot of imposter syndrome. Then, do I really belong here? And then again, when I started development, and that was really stupid. You know, to have imposter syndrome at 2015, back into 2015, early 2016, was really stupid because here's the thing, it's never been easier to make a game. And I was focused on the making of the game. And what I should have been focused on was the market. What is it that the market wants at this point? Because I didn't earn the right to be an artist because I hadn't become an artist. I'd never set out to be an artist. And here I was thinking I had to be an artist because I got deceived by the whole indie thing. And that was irrelevant. And what I mean by that is the tag doesn't matter. What matters is whether the market, whatever the market is, wants your game. And if you make something the market doesn't want, then you failed. And if you make something the market wants, then you succeeded. And that's, again, that measurement is done purely from a commercial perspective. And here I was thinking, am I good enough to be a games developer, an indie games developer? And that was a really stupid question to ask. So that imposter syndrome was actually totally self-defeating because it was not just that it was imposter syndrome, it's imposter syndrome on a false premise. And that's the most dangerous mistake you can make. So I would say, in summary, because I know that sounds really complicated, most people don't actually suffer from imposter syndrome. Most people suffer from shyness, nervousness, and that's totally normal, absolutely normal. And just like any discomfort, I can help you if you ever want to chat about it. And I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to whoever's listening. I can help you get past that. Happy to do that because there are ways you can do that. And it's exactly what we were talking about earlier, Rosie. It was, you know, there's going to be some temporary discomfort, but you see something bright and beautiful at the other side, and that's what pulls you through.
Yeah, it's worth it.
So, yeah, so that's the answer to nervousness, and that's the answer to anxiety, particularly performance anxiety. And I'm talking about presentations, speaking in front of other people, the things that usually help you get noticed in the workplace. Yeah. So that there are loads of techniques I can help people with. And the reason I know they work is because I've helped loads of people with this kind of thing before, and it's absolutely worked. And because I use these things on myself, it's no magic, and I'm not going to ask any money for it. Unless a big corporation asks, of course, in which case I do have a fee. But yeah,
it's true though.
You can do it. I mean, yeah, go on. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, like, even getting very meta with the podcast, like I was terrified to launch a podcast. And, if you'd spoken to me a year ago when I first joined and told me that I would be doing a podcast and I'd be on interviews, I would have run away laughing at you because I would never have believed it. But it is possible. And there are things you can do to train yourself to make it easier, and grow your comfort zone as well, because it's so important to be able to see where you flourish as well. And for me, the podcast has been absolutely a joy to be able to take control over doing it. But it's definitely not done without fear, from the beginning. And even like before every episode, I feel very sick and very very unsure.
Well, you're very good at this. I've been interviewed by a lot of people, and you are very good at this.
Thanks.
That's not just, I don't throw out compliments just for the sake of it. It's a rare skill to be able to get people to talk about themselves, not let them bang on infinitely long, but not feel compelled to jump in and make your own case too often. It's a really difficult skill. You clearly understand people. You clearly understand how to get people to talk. Anyway, you're really good at this, so keep going. It's really
Thanks.
nice doing this with you.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. That's really, really reassuring. Thank you. But
Not that you need me to tell you that, but I'm just saying from my view. Anyway,
oh, it
but
totally helps.
but yeah, so my point is imposter syndrome. We overuse the term, I feel. I think it's best reserved for people who are highly experienced, highly talented, very well known, and who've got a lot of experience. And this is not to put down anyone who uses the term. I think it's just become a convenient label for what is actually nervousness, anxiety, performance anxiety, fear, unworthiness, these feelings, right? So we kind of tend to lump them up when we start calling them imposter syndrome, but imposter syndrome is a specific scenario. But you
Mhm.
know, the answer to all of these is the same thing, really. You can work on this. You can work on the feelings, you can address the feelings, you can work on techniques, you can work on visualization, you can work on stuff that will help you to get in the right, absolutely the right mindset to perform at your absolute best. Because you need a little bit. You need a little bit of adrenaline. You need a little bit. So the easiest thing of all, right? Because I mentioned this in one of my newsletters, is to reframe terror as excitement. Right.
Yes, I
So
love that.
so you go to the top of a roller coaster, right? What do you feel then? You feel both terror and excitement. The reason is they're both the same feeling. It's how you think about it that determines how you feel about it. Because when you get off the roller coaster, you're not going, "Oh my God, I never want to do that again," except as a joke, because you totally loved it, you know, unless you're the
Yeah,
sort of
I mean,
person who
unless
never,
you really hate roller
yeah, unless
coasters,
you
but
really hate roller coasters and someone forced you to do it.
yeah,
So,
yeah, totally.
which is very, very different, right? And like we would never take somebody who'd never had any practice, never had any training, and make them deliver a presentation to a million people. That because that would be cruel. That's
Yeah.
actually, you know, you're potentially destroying a person's confidence for a very long
Yeah, I
time
was
by
gonna
doing
say
that.
you probably damaged them for
Yeah,
good if you
yeah,
did
yeah.
that.
It would take a lot of work to get them past that, and maybe they'd never be fixed. But yeah, but you know, for people who are kind of open to it, anyway. So my point is excitement, terror, very very similar.
No, it's nice though, and I think one thing that always kind of comforts me if I'm really nervous about something, just kind of reflects how much you care about what you're doing or what the outcome might be after you've finished as well. Because if you didn't care, you wouldn't be nervous at all. So it's almost a reassurance.
It is, but sometimes you know you're hijacked um, by your monkey brain. So there's a part of us that is still incredibly tribal, and we have little control over that. Steve Peters talks about this a lot in his amazing work, The Chimp Paradox, which I recommend to absolutely everyone time and time again. So he's a professor who helped England's 2012 Olympics cycling team achieve the massive success that they did, and he's gone on to help many other sporting um, phenomena for Britain, certainly. And he describes that part of our brain as a chimp, and the chimp belongs in a tribe, right? So if you get up on a stage and talk, what your chimp is frightened of is that you're going to get ridiculed by the tribe. And back when we were in tribes, if we got ridiculed and exiled from the tribe, what did that mean? That meant death. So that is literally in our biology. We are hardwired to think that if we mess up, if we do something that will upset our tribe, and of course today our tribe is whoever we associate with, our company, our industry, that's our tribe, right? We kind
Mm.
of chop and change tribes on almost an hourly basis. So for example, for me, Safe in Our World, the team is one of my tribes, right? So you get chucked out of a tribe. Back then, exile meant death, and that is still in our biology. And you can't just talk that away. You need specific techniques to work on that in order to harness the energy and persuade your chimp that actually you're not going to get chucked out from the tribe. And even if you were, you would still survive. And here's why. It takes a long time. It's not that simple, but you know, you can train yourself to not eliminate the fear, but you can train yourself to talk in spite of the fear.
Yes, because I think that's the thing. Like for me, especially, and I'm sure for a lot of other people, rationalizing a situation in which you're terrified of, or that you're really, you're very connected with, I suppose, even though you know that what you're feeling is irrational when you look at it from that perspective, it doesn't change anything. Then you're just like, I know it's irrational and I still feel this way. It's just rubbish. Like, I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right. And Professor Steve Peters talks about this as well. And the way he puts it is really elegant. He says, in the real world, a chimp is 7 times stronger than a human. And in a situation where you're emotional, your chimp is 7 times stronger than you. So you can't talk it down. And he offers several techniques that you can use to calm it down. I'm not going to talk about them here. I recommend that anyone who's listening gets the book and reads it cover to cover several times, as I have done.
Yeah, I mean, it
Because
sounds fascinating. I'm going to write it down just so I don't
yeah,
forget.
there are ways, there are ways you can do it. It takes time, takes practice, but you're absolutely right. You can't just battle your inner chimp, because your chimp's terrified and it's 7 times stronger than you. You don't want to antagonize it in that situation.
No, I agree. It's oh yeah, that's so interesting. I yeah, no, I'm going to look at that because that's something I've always struggled with. And when people are usually trying to comfort you and saying things, like, oh well, what's the worst that can happen? And
Death.
exactly, I'm like, oh, I don't know, literally the worst thing in the world, like.
Absolutely. Yeah. These people are well-meaning, but not well trained or versed in what's going
Yes,
on.
exactly, because then you'll just feel a bit daft for even saying anything in the first place, and probably
Yeah.
discourage you from talking about it again, which is not the point.
Absolutely.
Oh gosh. Yeah. So I'll just kind of spin the conversation back around just to talk about games themselves, because so how we usually start off the podcast is we will ask about the guests, just their favorite games, really, just to kind of talk about everyone's different experiences, and have I like highlighting that individuality of everyone's got a different personal relationship with games themselves, rather than the industry as well. So my question to you is, one, what are your favorite games, all time and current? But also, what do you see your personal relationship with games and mental health looking like?
Hmm. So, um, favorite games of all time: Star Raiders
Mhm.
on the Atari 400, Jet Set Willy on the Spectrum, Ultimate Underworld on the PC, God of War on the PlayStation 2.
Nice.
Super Crate Box is up there somewhere in my top 10.
Mhm.
Uh, Speedball 2 would be in my list. Turrican 2 would be in my list. Sensible Soccer would be in my list. All 3 on the Amiga.
Nice.
What else from the early days? Super Mario Kart on the SNES.
Yep.
Gran Turismo on the PS1. Current favorite, I mean, there are lots more, obviously, but off the
Of
top of my
course.
head, those are some of my favorite all time, going back to 82. Death's Door, which I got recently, and I'm playing on the PS5. It's published by
Nice.
Devolver. It's really, really beautifully done. It's charming.
I've
It's
actually not heard of
lovely.
it. What's it about?
Well, have a look. It's kind of it's got my favorite look. It's kind of isometric-ish, and it's very clever. You're playing a crow, and you're going through all of these doors and doing boss battles and stuff. But it's just so beautifully executed. The music is beautiful. The graphics are beautiful. The controls feel beautiful. The pacing is beautiful. It's charming. The dialogue is on point. It doesn't ramble on forever. It's just a really, really slick indie game, superbly executed, and feels right at home on the PS5. Very surprising. So that's the one I'm playing at the moment. But I'm also playing, I think it's Mario Party Superstars with a family,
Mhm.
which is just a great way for us all to, well, to hate each other.
I was just about to say, like, if you say anything other than anything negative right now, I'm going to be disappointed. Mario
No,
Party is there to wage wars with your family and drive wedges between you.
yeah. The other, yeah, absolutely right. And the other thing I'm doing quite a lot of is I play board games online now with a small circle of friends. So I'm not going to out my friends because I've known them for decades and they're in
Sure.
the industry. And they wouldn't like it if I outed them. Um, not because it's just a private thing. You know, we've
Yeah,
been
yeah,
around for
totally.
decades. We've all done all kinds of different things. And from time to time, we will play games together. But since COVID, we now play online and it works out really well. So we'll have a Discord session going and we'll have Board Game Arena up in a web browser and we'll play board games. And that's been amazing. And that's also kind of got me playing more board games with my family.
I
So,
yeah, I love board games.
well, I was never into board games. Never, ever, ever. And only got into them once COVID started. And now I love them. Now they're just oh yeah, Ink and Gold. Me and the family love that. It's so simple, but it's so cool. Really, really love that game. Very expensive though. I didn't get it. It's like
Oh,
50
no.
quid plus on Amazon. Normally these games are like 10, 15 quid. It's a really simple game, but it was worth every penny because we played it so much.
Yeah.
We play Mega Monopoly as a family as well. Mega Monopoly instead of just like you got Park Lane and Mayfair. With
Yeah.
Mega Monopoly, you've also got Knightsbridge, and that's like the biggest one. And
Oh, no. I don't know if I
yeah,
would have the I don't think I could play it. Like, I have to restrict who I play Monopoly with anyway because I'm like, it has to be someone I know I could stay friends with.
yeah, because it turns you into a raging capitalist.
It
Yeah, I
really
mean, the
does.
only way, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but it turns you into the worst kind of
I know.
rapacious capitalist, right? You will do anything to get ahead. Um,
Yeah, and it's not even that, but it's like the evil sense of when you win, you'd love to see the look on their face as it's like
yeah,
crestful and they've just realized they've
that's
lost everything. And it's like,
everything,
yeah, I'm like,
everything, yeah.
it's the best feeling in the world. I'm like, does that make me a bad person? Maybe. Oh gosh, yeah, I only play Monopoly with my best friend who I've known since I was like 4, so I know that that's not gonna change, but I don't think I could play it with my family. I don't think they'd ever forgive me. Ah, but no, board games, absolutely. Huge fan
And
of
you
board
were
games.
and you were talking about mental health. Please remind me
Yes,
about that.
I was just asking about what you saw your personal relationship with games themselves and your mental health being.
Well, that's changed over the years.
Mm,
In the beginning, it was escape, purely escape. It was a, a complete exit from the brutal racism, the sickness, the crippling austerity that I experienced as a child. And so games offered me a temporary way out of that. And they didn't require anyone else because other people, given that we were one of the very, very few brown people around, other people could betray you very, very quickly. They certainly would when the chips were down.
yeah,
So here's a way of just escaping without the risk of another person betraying you into a world that didn't care what your skin color was and didn't punish you for not being strong because you're a weak, underweight, sick type 1 diabetic who's never really controlled their condition. Didn't punish you for anything. All it did was video games felt like, it's like I say in my thread, code is just. And what I mean by that is code just doesn't care. And
no,
you would have to write it to care. And that would be the human doing that. But otherwise, if you haven't deliberately set about trying to do that, which I think some governments are now trying to do, and certainly some companies are trying to do, profiling, and
yeah,
usually in order to extract more money out of demographics, not necessarily always for nefarious reasons. But back then, it was very much a case of this thing doesn't care. I'm going to have a good time, and this is a new world. Remember, there were no video games. when I was a kid. It's only when I started growing up that there were video games that first made their appearance in the world at all. So to experience these in your home as long as you wanted, especially the likes of something like Star Raiders, which for me is still the greatest technical achievement of all time, was the greatest mind comforter you could imagine. Because, like I feel really sad and upset for modern youngsters. There's no escape from for them at all. They're always connected to their tribe. For me, I could disconnect. I had some blissful hours where I could just play video games and completely disconnect. There were no mobile phones, so there was no direct path to your mind. And that's what they offered me in the early days. Now, there's another side to it as well. And this is controversial. You all right with me being a bit controversial?
No, not at all. Go for it. I think it's important that we discuss both sides of it because games don't always have a positive effect on mental health.
No, it's not so much that. They are a reflection. I think they're a reflection of what's going on in the mind of the player,
Okay.
and they form a feedback loop. Um, so I'm not necessarily going to be negative about games per se, but okay, let me just jump into it. Okay,
Yeah,
so
just go for it.
when my career was going really badly at PlayStation, or rather, when my perception of how my career was going was bad, because it was actually fine. Around the time Call of Duty Modern Warfare came out, and I would come home from work, sit down in front of the PlayStation, and I would play Call of Duty for 2 or 3 hours every night, and just completely zone out and just disconnect from my life, disconnect from my family, disconnect from my pain. And often I would just get angry. I'd just get angry. And the anger was not when I lost the game, even though that was when I'd get angry specifically. It was a growing anger at the lack of control I felt I had over my life and over my progress. But I think during those 1.5 years when I was doing that pretty consistently, I was working things out in my head. So it offered a backdrop, and it did offer me an escape. I mean, the thing is, it wasn't necessarily the best way of handling it. I didn't need a 1.5 years of Call of Duty Modern Warfare therapy, so to speak, in order to get to a point where I started to realize things weren't right. Um, I I don't think that was necessarily helpful, that behavior. But I don't think it was harmful either. I think it was just necessary.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need that release, and you don't want anything else. You don't need anything else. Sometimes things just aren't going to work out for you. The time is not right. You're not ready. And you've just got to handle it the best way you can. So for me, Call of Duty during that period was just a release valve. I think that's the best way of putting it.
Mm.
A release valve.
Yeah, I kind of relate to what you mean. Like, games have always been consistent throughout my life, even though I didn't necessarily realize that for a while. Somewhere where I would go if I was feeling particularly low or if I was, suffering bereavement or anything like that.
And during that downtime, things are happening in your brain. Your brain is not silent. There is activity. And if your conscious mind is occupied with the game, then your subconscious is working away, like figuring out connections and what have you. Look, I'm not a neurologist or a neuroscientist, but I'm fairly convinced that you need some time to have your conscious brain immersed in some kind of act. It's almost like a meditation of sorts, because you're
Yeah.
totally focused on the present. It's a very reactive kind of meditation. So strictly speaking, it's not meditation, but it does mean your conscious brain is engaged enough that your subconscious can get to work organizing stuff, moving stuff into place. Of course, you can't do it forever, right? Sooner or later, you got to do something.
Yeah, totally. But I kind of see it as like almost a parallel of when you've stared at work too long and you go for a walk and you come back and your head's a bit clearer.
Yeah,
It's almost the same thing.
yeah, almost. There's
Almost.
the thing is, you're right though. There should be some research done on this because there has been research done on walking, and walking does actually help, especially if you walk in nature. There's lots of research to show that even 20 minutes of walking in nature, like if you walk near a wooded area or near trees or whatever, it has a massively positive effect on you in more ways than just the exercise and so on. You
Yeah.
certainly get some brain, that BDNF, brain derived neurotropic factor, I think it is, which stimulates neuron growth, something like that anyway. But
Mm.
you know neurologists and neuroscientists, so better ask them. But definitely good stuff happens when you go for a walk in the park, and I'm
Yes.
sure
But it's
video
like,
games are similar.
well, yeah, because there was a study done on Tetris, and it was saying that people who
Yeah,
played Tetris
we
during
need more than
times of,
Tetris
like,
though,
stress.
don't we?
Oh, I agree. I think it's a really interesting step into that field of research to know that, like, playing Tetris could potentially reduce the effects of
Well,
PTSD for some people.
PTSD, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which is
it's
amazing.
incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. But the thing is, we need lots more research in this field. And
Oh,
all the research we've had so
yeah.
far has been, well, in other areas. So
Yeah, or it's done, in a way that the sample size isn't huge, or it's not very representative of the whole industry or the global industry
mm,
or people around the world. And so, yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I would love to be involved with, or to see the growth of it happening with the research, because I think there's so much out there. We just
mm,
don't know it. Um,
mm.
but just in the I'm just looking at the time, just making sure that you're still okay for me to just
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
wrap up
Don't
and
worry.
then we can do it. But amazing. Because I don't know, I find research like that so interesting, so I'm always, keen to learn more, and, like,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
the psychology behind it as well is
Mm,
fascinating to me, and, like, what you were saying about the Chimp Paradox
mm.
is, um is a really interesting way to put it, because it kind of takes away the pressure that it's all, I don't know, sometimes I think people feel responsible for their own anxiety, and it's not, obviously, it's not your fault.
Yeah, yeah.
But there are ways to help you around it as well,
It's
so
not your fault, but as the human, you're responsible for
yes,
managing it. That's the
it's your
difference. Yeah.
responsibility. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not your fault, it's your
Yeah.
responsibility. I think I saw that on Twitter today, actually. I was just like, "Wow, that's a great way of putting it." So,
So
um,
the way Professor Steve Peters puts it is that you have a dog. If the dog misbehaves, it's not your fault that the dog misbehaved, but it is your responsibility as its owner to have managed it better, to have prevented it from misbehaving.
yes,
So
exactly.
yeah, there you go. That's you and your rational brain and your chimp acting sometimes against each other. It's a brilliant book, really, honestly. I can't recommend it highly enough.
No, I'm absolutely gonna look it up. Don't worry, I've written it down on a piece of paper in front of me, so I'm gonna look into it. But I also think that's a really nice way to end the podcast. I've had such a blast chatting with you today. Thank you so much for
Me
coming on.
too. My
Um,
absolute pleasure. Been looking
yeah, no,
forward to this for a while.
yeah, me too. And I know we've had it in the diary for a while as well. So I've, yeah, slowly just waiting for it to happen. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Where can people find you, Shahid?
Best place is at Shahid Kamal on Twitter,
Hmm.
and my DMs are open. Everything you probably want to know about me can be found on the internet. There's still many, many dark secrets, and I'd like to leave it to people's imagination as to what they might be. But
That sounds so ominous.
no, 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 nothing like that. Pretty much everything about me is on the internet, though. So yeah,
Yes,
go.
and please do go and read Code is Just. It's fantastic, and
Yes,
it's a good read. And you did, just off topic as well, you did a reading on Twitter,
I
right?
did, and I turned it into a podcast. So
Ah,
if you
yes.
just go to codeisjust.com, that will redirect you to the thread. But if you go to podcast.codeisjust.com, that will redirect you to the podcast. Which reminds me, thanks for reminding me, I need to do a recording of season 2.
Yeah,
and
because I
stick
had
that in
that on
the
in the
podcast.
background while I was working, and it was just
Right.
great. So yes, please go and check that out. And just to wrap up the podcast, if you're struggling, you're not alone. There's a lot of support out there. We've talked a little bit about our own coping mechanisms and things already, but if you're looking for somewhere to start, there's a lot of different resources at our website at safeinourworld.org, as well as a lot of information and just general support that might be helpful. But thank you for tuning in to this episode of Safe Space, and we'll see you next time.